We're here in Melbourne, Florida, to have an interview with Joe Krienes, teacher conductor. What got you started on your career path? How did you discover music?
I was about 6 or 6.5 years old when my parents bought an upright piano and stuck it in my bedroom, and I started plinking on it. And they decided to ask me whether I wanted lessons, and I started taking piano lessons, and that was the first thing that got me involved seriously in music making.
This was in Chicago?
This was in Chicago, correct.
And that was where you had the beginnings of your education in music through high school, or?
Yes.
How did that happen?
I went to the University of Chicago Laboratory School, which was a private school administered by the University of Chicago, and music was not an important activity at the school, but nevertheless I encountered a wonderful musician there named Harris Vale, who taught music appreciation, and he regarded me as someone who should be encouraged, and that was a great help for me to pursue music. That plus starting to go to hear the Chicago Symphony every week at their subscription concerts inspired me greatly. And I started a recordings collection when I was 10 years old. And it grew and grew and grew. And that really started me off in realizing just how big the world of music was and how much I had to learn.
So while you were in Chicago, you were primarily an orchestral director?
I didn't start conducting orchestras until age 21, when I was engaged as conductor of the University of Chicago Symphony. Up to that time, I wanted to be a conductor, I guess in my middle teen years, and I finally took advantage of the opportunity to go study conducting at Tanglewood, where I was for 3 summers. When I got in the middle of that tenure at Tanglewood, I got this opportunity to conduct the University of Chicago Symphony, which I held for 2 years. Then the next stage was my involvement in Florida, which...
Well, you mentioned a trip to Europe and your Tanglewood experiences. Could you expand on that a bit?
Yes. In 1953, I was 17, and I discovered an advertisement for a music festival tour to Europe, and I thought this would be something that would be worthwhile, so I asked my parents if I could go, and all by my little self I went, along with a group. Actually, it was a group tour of about 7 or 8 people, and this was to visit a number of different music festivals in Europe. This was a great trip. The trip part was great, but the music that I heard and the performances that I heard in the festivals that I attended were fantastic. And that inspired me so much that I got very serious about pursuing music as a career. And then 3 years later, I went to Tanglewood for the first of 3 summers to study conducting. And that also was a great experience from another vantage point. It was the first time I had ever been with nobody but musicians 24/7, students from all over the country, and all over other countries too as well, who were studying music and who were serious about music, who were wonderful musicians. And hearing them play and hearing them sing and watching them conduct also was a great valuable experience, let alone the faculty that was there, including Aaron Copland and Leonard Bernstein and people like that. It was, all in all, it was a major contributor to my development as a musician.
Fantastic. What great opportunities. You consider yourself a teacher conductor. Could you explain that definition?
Yes. I think, I don't remember who said this. Maybe it was Bruno Walter, but I think who was a great conductor. He said a conductor must also be a teacher. And I remember that phrase, and I thought, yeah, that's true, because when you rehearse with a group, you are teaching them how to play it better, or how to play it your way. So in that sense, you're a teacher. And in fact, I have been engaged in the teaching profession from that angle ever since I started conducting. And conversely, I have never been officially a teacher in the public school system in Florida, but nevertheless, I have worked in the public school system in Florida as a teacher, clinician, conductor. So from that point of view, I have worked as a teacher in the state of Florida for some 48, 49 years now.
Well, we left you in Chicago, sent you to Europe, brought you back to Tanglewood, but how did you end up here in Florida?
As it happens, I had some friends who were in Chicago who also participated as professional musicians in the Florida Symphony. And one of those, Principal Oboe, told me that there was an opportunity for me to be assistant conductor, possibly be assistant conductor in the Florida Symphony. So I came down to visit in Orlando back in 1961 and met the conductor, and nothing was official, but they seemed to be interested in the possibility. They were going to dismiss the assistant conductor who was then operating there because he was unsatisfactory. So in December of 1961, I came to Florida as assistant conductor of the Florida Symphony Orchestra, and I remained in that position for 4 years. And as a consequence of that, I also got involved in the development of the Florida Symphony Youth Orchestra, which at that time was called the Florida Symphony Youth Training Orchestra. I became its conductor in January of 1963. And the students in that orchestra were enthusiastic about my work and asked me if I would be interested in conducting their bands. And I thought, gee, I don't know. I've never really conducted band, and I wasn't specifically involved in it, so I didn't know whether I could or not. But they thought I could do it. And eventually I ended up visiting Winter Park High School, and the director, Jack Williams, put me to work conducting the band, and he liked my work, and I became a mainstay at Winter Park and some other schools, thanks to Jack's calling a number of other band directors and telling them that I could be of value to their program.
Fantastic. What challenges have you encountered as a teacher conductor?
I think the first thing you have to be aware of is what you are doing and how you are doing it when you are engaged in the process of conducting and teaching. What I mean is that you have to be aware of the group's capacities, its limitations, and also its abilities to grow and expand. I think one of the things that is very hard for beginning teachers to realize is they're dealing with students who don't know what you know. And your job is to get across to them what you know and make it work for them so that they will become better players and better musicians. So the challenge is first assessing the situation that you are in, what you know and what you need to know, and then how to adapt what you know to the students that you're dealing with. I found I was lucky, I guess. I mean, I seem to have been born with the capacity to communicate to people. And so I didn't have to fumble for words and try to figure out what to say. It just sort of came out of me. I respond very quickly to oral phenomena. When I hear a group play, I pretty quickly can assess what their issues are, whether it's intonation or rhythm or phrasing or style or just overall musical preparation. And then I have to say the right thing to get them to do something better. You can't do it all at once. That's another piece of advice. I think a lot of people get very frustrated. Oh, there's so many things wrong with it. How do I do this? So you have to take one thing at a time. and get it better. And the minute you do that, you have already gotten through to the students, and they sense, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about. And then they will start to listen to you more with greater concentration and greater interest, because you have demonstrated, without necessarily determining how you're going to do that, you just did it. And if you proceed along those lines, you'll discover that you can get a lot more done. Instead of throwing up your hands and saying, how do I rehearse this? Just take one thing at a time and isolate it, and then work at it that way, and you will discover over a period of a few days or maybe even a few weeks, things will get so much better that the students will feel good about what they've done, and you'll feel good about what you've done.
Well, that's great advice, and it leads us right into the very next question, which is, what words of wisdom or advice do you want to pass on to young directors and future directors?
I think the most important thing is knowing music. And I don't just mean knowing the 3 pieces of music that you're preparing for MPA, or the Christmas concert music, or whatever it is else that you're doing. I mean knowing the entire art. That doesn't mean you're going to know every single piece, because that's ridiculous, that's impossible. But start with the idea that you want to expand your horizons. If you know certain pieces of band literature, find other pieces of band literature that you don't know. Forget about whether you're going to ever conduct that piece or not. If you know that it's an important piece, you should know it. And do the same thing with the orchestra literature. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with a number of the Beethoven symphonies, but maybe there's 1 or 2 you don't know. Well, get to know that 1 or 2 that you don't know, and explore the rest of the repertory. There's a huge repertory of orchestra literature that I think everybody should get to know. You're not going to do this overnight. You're going to do this over your life. And then do the same thing with vocal music, choral music, chamber music for strings, chamber music for winds. It doesn't matter. Every area that has a repertory, you owe it to yourself to get to know. And if you do, you will find your life invariably enriched. And if that happens, you will feel that you can continue to grow and develop along these lines, because you'll never stop growing that way.
Fantastic. You talked to me a bit about your experiences as an accompanist for vocalists, and I'd like to know how that has helped you with bands. How can vocal music and accompanying lead to such success with bands?
Well, if you're a true accompanist, your job is to accompany the part that you're accompanying. That is, you're not there just to play the notes of the piano part. Of course, that's important. But what your real job is to do is to help the vocalist, or in the vocalist, but it's also instrumentalists, how to play better, musically, technically, whatever it takes, because there's always corrections that need to be made. I have never had a rehearsal with anybody where the solo part was perfect, or that the solo part and my part fit perfectly together, that we had to rehearse. And so rehearsal is teaching, as far as I'm concerned. And the minute you see this process evolving and developing, you begin to realize that what you're doing is basically carries over in every other area of preparing music for performance. That is, you're improving it, and you're improving through rehearsal, and what do you do in those rehearsals to improve it is going to relate directly to how you conduct your band or your orchestra. It doesn't matter what it is. It's the same process. You make corrections or you improve it. I don't like it saying you make corrections. It sounds like you're going down a list. We're making corrections in there. But nevertheless, it's the same process. You have to find a way of doing this so that the performance that results will be better. And so that's the attitude that I take all the time. The rehearsal process is the most important process in developing the not just the technical but the musical understanding that goes with the performance.
Great. Is there something about your personal character that you would say has helped you become the success you are?
I think most people who know me know that I am very, very passionate and very excited about music. I think one of the things that everybody has said about me is that it's very clear to them when they watch me rehearse or when they talk to me that I love the art that I am trying to serve. And that passion and that enthusiasm and that intensity is the thing that really, I think, keeps me going. Even when it's music that I don't like personally, I can still find a way to get involved in it to improve the way it's being played. There is always something to be said for making it more musical or more performance oriented than just playing the notes, which has never been enough for me. So that's what keeps me going, and even at my retirement age, I still have the same kind of enthusiasm I had when I started.
You've said music goes beyond the notes. Can you expound on that for us, please?
Yes. I think that a lot of performers get so wrapped up in playing all of the notes correctly that they tend to miss, sometimes, in fact more often than they should, tend to miss what's really important, which is the music. Now, what do I mean by that? Because the music is the notes, isn't it? No. Somebody else said this, I think it was Arthur Schnabel, but I'm not sure, the great Austrian pianist. But I believe this. Music is not the notes. Music is the relationship between the notes. How you get from one note to another is the beginning of making music. If you don't have a sense of that kind of direction, of that kind of feeling of forward movement, of line, of delineating a phrase, whatever, however you want to put it, you're not going to be playing music, you're going to be playing notes. Notes are important, but notes are only the first stage. So I try to teach the idea that music relates to continuity, that you have to think horizontally, because music is not vertical. It's not, I mean, it is vertical in the sense that we have to play our parts together, and that makes a vertical sound. But it's getting from one place to another in music is the time factor, right? We're going from A to B, and it's how you get there that makes the music happen. If you just play the notes from A to B, you're going to have a feeling that you haven't gone anywhere. And I can't explain it verbally. It has to be demonstrated musically, but I think the people who are observing this video will understand what I'm getting at when I say that music has to be determined horizontally. Because music is sound and time is the horizontal dimension, not a vertical dimension. So when you get that idea across, you will be at the beginning, at least, of making music.
What did you do throughout your career to keep your edge, to keep the passion flowing?
It's continuing to learn more music. I mean, I constantly am amazed. I mean, if you can see the background in this room, you see a lot of recordings. You don't see anywhere near all of the recordings that I have. And I don't just buy recordings to make them look good on the walls. They're there to be listened to, and I have tried to listen to every single recording that I have. I haven't been totally successful in that, but I've listened to the vast majority of what I have in my library, more than just once also, because that's what it's all about. You listen to a piece once, you don't get all of the musical information on one hearing, especially if it's a great piece of music, you don't. Sometimes it's a piece that I've listened to once and I don't really care for it, but I want to find out why is it that somebody else likes this. Maybe I can figure out why, so I want to listen to it again. And that's happened to a number of pieces, particularly in the more recent repertory in the band world. I've listened to a number of those pieces, and I still don't find much there of musical value, but nevertheless, I have to give it a chance because other people whom I respect are playing these pieces, and I want to figure out why. So that's what keeps me going, is the constant process of learning. Learning never stops, for me. It's a continuing process.
Earlier today, you told me that you will sometimes take a day or a week and just study one composer, listen to the recordings of Mahler or Beethoven, or what prompts you to do that, and what do you get from that experience?
Well, most of the time, in more recent times, it's been celebrating the anniversaries of composers. This year, 2013, is the 200th anniversary of two great composers, Verdi and Wagner, and the 100th anniversary of two important, to varying degrees, but nevertheless important composers of the 20th century, Norman Dello Gioia and Benjamin Britten. And particularly Benjamin Britten, because his output was so large, and he wrote so many operas and so many instrumental pieces. I mean, it was an enormous output, over 100 opuses. So I've spent a lot of time. Last month it was Benjamin Britten, because his 100th anniversary was November 22nd. And the previous month was Verdi, because Verdi's 100th was in October. And in May, I celebrated Wagner by listening to as many of the Wagner operas as I could. So, and that has given me a greater awareness of their greatness as composers, and also of the music that they wrote, because there's a lot of music there, and you can't possibly know all of it unless you give it a chance to be heard, give yourself a chance to hear it. So, and concentrating on those specific composers has made me appreciate how valuable they have been to the art of music over the years.
What do you do now in your semi-retirement to keep the creative juices going?
Well, as a matter of fact, you mentioned creative, and I have been engaged in composing. Off and on, I've been a composer. I hate to use that word apply to myself, because I regard myself as a person who writes music, not a person who's a composer in capital letters. But I am proud of some of my compositions, and I've been engaged in writing some more lately. Most of the compositions that I've written that I think are worthwhile are the ones that are based upon other people's efforts. That means melodies that are familiar either as folk tunes or other people's melodies that I've used as the basis for my own compositions. So I've done some folk song suites. I just finished a set for a middle school band called 3 American Folk Songs, where I took Sweet Betsy from Pike, I've Been Working on the Railroad, and For He's a Jolly Good Fellow, and wrote 3 movements based upon those melodies. My own settings. The melodies are there, but they're set in different ways. That is, the melody is stated sometimes in the upper voice, sometimes in the bass. I've also written variations on the melody and changed the harmony, so that each time the setting appears, it's different. And I've done that with a number of others. I did another American folk song set originally for brass, but I've also done it for band and for strings, called American Folk Song Set. And that included Red River Valley, Polly Wolly Doodle, Home on the Range, and Turkey in the Straw. And I'm very proud of that piece. I think it's the best thing that I've done overall as a large piece. It's about a 12 to 14 minute piece, 4 movements. And I've also done some transcriptions. I've done a lot of transcriptions. In fact, that was how I got started back in involving my creative impulses, was in doing transcriptions, starting about 33 years ago. I did a transcription for band of the Buxtehude Chaconne for organ, transcribed it for band, and that started me on transcribing other composers, Percy Grainger being a favorite, I guess, of a lot of people, my transcriptions of Grainger. And I've done Verdi and Wagner, speaking of Verdi and Wagner, and Brahms, and Mozart, and a number of other composers music that I thought would be appropriate to transcribe. And not only transcribed for band, I've transcribed for orchestra. In fact, I've transcribed 2 band pieces for orchestra, namely Lincolnshire Posy and Chorale and Alleluia. And I've also transcribed for saxophone ensemble, transcribed for flute choir, transcribed for strings. So I'm involved in a lot of transcribing. Why do I do transcriptions? Because I think it's important for students to get familiar with the music, not just by listening to it, but by getting their fingers into it, so to speak. And I think if you ask students whether they've learned more from playing the pieces than just listening to it, they will all invariably say yes. Because I've asked a number of students, and whether they thought it was really worthwhile learning the transcription and playing it. And the answer has been invariably yes. I am confident enough in my transcriptions to feel that they are worthy of playing, because I believe in being very faithful to the original version, which means I take the original literally and I transcribe it into another medium, whether it's band or saxophones or whatever. I don't leave anything out. I don't water anything down. With a very few exceptions, I don't even change octaves. I will add upper octave sometimes or lower octave, but very rarely. Otherwise, I stay as faithful to the original as I can. And it's benefited me in a number of respects. My latest work, one of my latest works, was the 4 sea interludes from Peter Grimes by Benjamin Britten, which has been taken on by Boozy and Hawkes and is going to be coming out this next year. My transcription is going to be published in the Windependent series.
Well, congratulations. That's wonderful.
One more thing that I should add about my work is the book that I wrote some 25 years ago called Music for Concert Band, which I wrote for about 500 pieces of music that I regarded to be worth band director's attention. I wrote a paragraph, sometimes a long paragraph, sometimes just a short one, indicating what was in the piece and why I thought it was worthwhile. Since in the last year, I've been working on an updating of this book.
Fantastic.
And it is coming out. Meredith Music is publishing it. It should be out in the next couple of months or so. It's going to be called, as far as I know, Music for a Concert Band, 2nd edition. So if you're interested in the band literature, I think you will find it of value and of use. So look for it, and Meredith Music, as I said, will be publishing it.
Wonderful. And you will be doing a book signing?
Well, no, I don't. I mean, if somebody comes to me and wants me to sign their copy, I'll be glad to sign it, of course.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, this has been a delightful half hour, and it's time for us to wrap things up, but I was hoping you would tell us the story about when Melbourne High School played Music for Prague at State.
Yes. There's many stories that I can tell about my encounters with different bands and orchestras at State, MPA, or other performances. But this one has stuck in the mind for a reason I think you'll understand at the end. Music for Prague, they were one of the first bands to play, high school bands to play Music for Prague in Florida. This was in 1971. And I helped them work on it, and it was a very exciting experience to work with them on it. And they went to State MPA, and they got a 5-minute standing ovation. It was an amazing event, and the audience was absolutely overwhelmed by the performance and showed their excitement by standing up. Afterwards, I went backstage to congratulate the band director and see some of the kids. One of the kids came over to me and said, "Mr. Krienes, we could have played it better than that." And I thought that was really great, that a high school student would appreciate the fact that they worked hard, they got a standing ovation, they got straight superior ratings, but it wasn't good enough for him because they could have played it better. He celebrated the moment in appreciation, but he also realized that their band had performed at least a good deal of it better than they did that particular occasion, and he felt that it was important to get that across, that it wasn't about the trophy and it wasn't about the superiors and it wasn't about the standing ovation. It was about the music and that they could have done better. I think that's a great story, and I will carry it with me for the rest of my life.
Well, I think this has been a great interview, And it's time to say goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.